It's off.
Man, we need Minka to do some of that Minka.
Never say never, but never.
We do not care.
Forget the opponent. They're nameless gray faces. I would much rather say whoa than sick 'em.
I never seen a dude crib one in the preseason be unemployed.
Comfort is not something that we seek.
Ball in the hand plus grab. Ball in the hand plus grab. Whoa! No excuses, no explanations.
I don't think a lot about the things that I say, to be honest with you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another year of 2024 NFL Power Rankings preview here on the Raw Prospect Podcast YouTube channel. My name is Michael Ween, high atop a post-hurricane Beryl, Houston, Texas. And we are live Wednesday, July 10th, 10:25 p.m., 2 weeks until NFL teams open training camps. And tonight, for the second year in a row, we are starting our NFL preview via Power Rankings. We're going to be doing 2 teams per episode, counting down number 20 to number 1. But within the rankings, there are tiers, which we will explain, 4 of which, the top one having only 1 team. We will explain those as we go. Joining me tonight, as always, from Austin, Texas, is a man who is dying for football to get here. We now have a niche, now that it's almost mid-July, and training camps and fall camps are about to open for both the NFL and college football. Also my co-host on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Go check out all of our great content that we've been putting out, including last night's episode where we started our college football previews down in the Sunshine State. Mr. Emmy Nixon, what's up?
Nothing much, man. Dude, you know I am a football guy through and through, man. I love basketball. I'm starting to get in baseball a little bit. I dabble in watching soccer here and there and F1 and all this, but football is my shit, bro. Like this is the time of year, and this is the first of what is it going to be? I think it's going to be like 5 or 6 episodes, 2 teams per episode, breaking down each team, their expectations, their roster changes, everything of that nature. We're going to give you all of the info you need about your team going into this season.
I think it's going to be 10 episodes. If it's 2 teams per episode, there's 20 teams.
Yeah.
There's going to be 10 episodes. And now that we're, I think, less than 10 weeks from the season beginning, we're going to have probably 2 episodes in a week here or there. But y'all will get the gist of it. Tonight, we're starting with numbers 20 and 19. But before we get into the meat of our NFL preview and kick things off with our number 20 team, who I'll just go ahead and tell you because you see it in the title and you see it down there on the ticker, is the Indianapolis Colts. After we conclude this show, it should be around 45, 50 minutes if we're smart about it. I'm actually going to go and watch. You know how Netflix did that quarterback series?
Yeah.
Today, they released
a
similar series, but for receivers. So I'm going to go dabble in that after we watch this show, or we finish this, to see if it's any good. I know Justin Jefferson's in it, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and a couple other big-time names. So I'm going to go see if it's any good or if it's as good or better than the quarterback stuff, because I did enjoy some of the behind-the-scenes stuff from the quarterback series. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our number 20 team, the Indianapolis Colts. Really fast before we do that, this is how it's going to work in case you don't remember from last year. We're going to do a quick 2023 recap. We're then going to, I guess you would call it rank our 3 most favorite offseason acquisitions. Could be a signing, could be a trade, could be draft picks. We're then going to rank our 3 most important players for this upcoming season. And then we're going to finish with a 2024 outlook and over/under win total prediction, and we'll do that for each team. So, Emmy Nixon, why don't you kick us off with our number 20 team, the Indianapolis Colts, and the 2023 recap?
Yep. The Colts last season, of course, finished second in their division to the Houston Texans after obviously the collapse. I guess that is a little bit of a harsh word, but collapse of the Jacksonville Jaguars a little bit towards the end of the season there. But nonetheless, they made the most of a quote-unquote lost season after losing starting quarterback Anthony Richardson. And now coming into this year 2 of Anthony Richardson, he's back healthy, and they've added to the key positions on this roster. What have we said for years about the Colts? It's little. Oh, I'll get into that later. I'm going to stick to the recap. Sorry. Their main portion of last year was with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, and he did a really good job. And I think the biggest takeaway from that you can have as a Colts fan from 2023 is that you have your coach in Shane Steichen, and he's going to be there for a long time. He's one of the younger coaches in the NFL, offensive-minded, and you're probably looking at, not to get ahead of ourselves, the next decade with this guy, hopefully. And you can feel very confident that you have your quarterback, even though it's not quite set in stone yet, given the injury he had so early in the year. But when he was in there, he looked really good, and now they've got another year to kind of get this thing going again. And I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, this Indianapolis Colts team won 9 games last year. I think they finished third in their division, but in a couple other divisions, they would be in the playoffs. They would be first, and that was with Anthony Richardson, who was the 4th overall pick last year, only starting 4 games. Now, you remember in September of last year, they also signed their running back, Jonathan Taylor, to one of the richest contracts in the league with nearly $20 million in guarantees to wrap up what was a pretty contentious contract dispute. And he played just 10 games between a negotiation that took place and being on the PUP list with a thumb injury and some other nagging injuries. But to win 9 games with Gardner Minshew and to be literally 1 or 2 plays away from maybe winning 10 or 11 games is certainly encouraging for the Colts. They added to that this offseason. If you look at their schedule from last year, I look at 2 games that really stand out to me that could have swung the other way very easily, and if they had, would have easily put them in the playoffs. Those games were hosting Cleveland on October 22nd, a game that they lost 39-38, could have very easily won. And then the last week of the season, January 6th, against their division rival, the Houston Texans, a game that they could have probably easily won had 1 or 2 plays gone their way. 23-19, they lost that game. They win one of those 2 games, you're 10-7 and you're probably in. But they didn't, and so here we are. But a lot to look forward to for this year. So that's the 2023 recap. Let's go ahead and get into our 3 favorite offseason acquisitions that the Colts have made over the course of the spring and into the summer. So I'll start with you.
Well, number one, I think we just say one and then we go back to the other person. You cool with that?
Yeah.
For me, my favorite addition that they made was Leatu Latu in the first round of the NFL draft. I think what this team has needed for years is a just a alpha edge rusher that is just going to go out there and win on the outside, beat his matchup, because they have the luxury of having a DeForest Buckner on the interior. And for years, they haven't really been able to take advantage of the attention that he gets on the inside. They've, made moves at edge, but they haven't worked out to their full potential. And I think, with guys like Kwity Paye and some of the other guys that they've signed, the key distinction when you look at Latu as to compare to some of those other guys is Latu has just that extra bit of polish and, just coming out of college, a pass rush plan that some of these other guys just didn't really have. So there's not much, coaching up you got to do with Leatu Latu. He's going to come into the NFL and be the guy, I think. And in my opinion, was the best edge rusher in this class.
Yeah, he's number one on my list as well. And it didn't really take much debate for me. The only scary thing with Latu was that neck injury that he suffered back in 2020 that basically forced him to medically retire for a few years. But his return was that of a beast. I mean, he was unstoppable. If you look at the 2 years at UCLA, or the past 2 years to finish his college career, 34 TFLs and 23 and a half sacks over 2 years in college football is insanity at the Power 5 or Power 4 level. Very productive player. He's got all the technical moves to make an immediate impact on this defense. If you remember last year, it was Samson, is it Ibukim? I always struggle.
Yeah, Ebukam. Yeah.
Ebukam, who led this unit in sacks with 9.5. And although their former first-round pick that you mentioned, Kwity Paye, is still capable,
right?
Absolutely, they're still lacking, I believe, that number one alpha guy off the edge that a lot of these other really good teams in the AFC have. I think Kwity Paye, when it's all said and done, can be, or not Kwity Paye, Leatu Latu, this draft pick could be the guy that maybe turns into a tier 1 or high tier 2 kind of productive number 1 edge guy in the NFL. That's one of the things this defense has been lacking for years. So Chris Ballard said it after they drafted him. With this pick and I guess a couple other moves they made, including bringing in Raekwon Davis for some depth on their defensive line in free agency. So they weren't really that active in free agency.
Right. Yeah, they were just re-signing their guys for the most part.
Chris Ballard said, quote, "I feel like this is our best defensive front since we've been here, since this front office has been here." And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, with the pick a lot too. So we agree on that one. Who was your number 2? Or do you want me to tell you my number 2?
Well, my number 2 was a combination of 2 guys that I thought were extremely important for them to re-sign. And it was important that I think for them to not, try and get the hometown discount, because these are 2 premium guys at their positions. And that's DeForest Buckner and Zaire Franklin. DeForest Buckner, I'll start with him. I mentioned him when I was talking about Leatu Latu. He's been a stalwart for this team for years now. And, I think looking back on the DeForest Buckner trade, I think you do it over and over again in a heartbeat, man. Like, I think for him to have given you 5 years of this consistent amount of production, perennially Pro Bowl, perennially be an all-pro caliber player, I mean, that's invaluable at the defensive tackle position. And then Zaire Franklin, after Shaq Leonard ended up, kind of getting banged up with his injuries over the year and kind of lost a step a little bit. It was Zaire Franklin that kind of took charge of that middle linebacker spot for them. And he really did an amazing job in these last couple of years on a very cheap price tag that he was at. So they ended up signing him for a 3-year, $31 million deal, which I think still is a bargain. $10 million a year for who I think is a top 7 or 8 linebacker. I would say in terms of coverage instincts and for the system he plays in as well. I think he's a perfect fit for this system, which is also why they were able to work out a deal because it worked for both sides.
Yeah, I like it. I'll go ahead and give you my number 2 and number 3. At number 2, I had the Adonai Mitchell pick in the second round from Texas. Very talented. Talk about playing in high leverage games in college, 5 college football playoff games, scored touchdowns in all of them. 4.34 second 40, I think, surprised a lot of people at the combine. But he's going to get ample snaps. He's really going to help Michael Pittman opposite him in this offense, I think. Pittman's coming off a career best year, 109 receptions for over 1,100 yards. And a lot of that pressure, a lot of that burden, I think, is going to be taken off of him with a guy like Mitchell. Can go up, makes catches, reliable hands. And then you also have a guy like Josh Downs in the slot who has the speed and can spread out defenses and prevent guys like Pittman and or Mitchell from potentially being doubled. So I really liked the Mitchell pick because I felt like for years this offense has kind of lacked a number 2, a real bona fide number 2 kind of guy, or even a number 1 in some instances. And then number 3 for me was the DeForest Buckner move. And the reason I bring it up is because, he's their best, arguably their best defensive player. He's their best defensive lineman, anchoring a unit that was much better against the rush than its number 24 ranking last year suggests, because Grover Stewart was suspended for 6 games. And he also got paid for another 3 years. And so I like re-signing those guys because Buckner is, in my opinion, the best or most impactful player on this defense. And then you also bring in a guy like Raekwon Davis, who's kind of that run-plugging defensive tackle depth, who signed for 3 years after 4 years in Miami. So I like what they did on the defensive line as a whole. So yeah.
Yeah, for my last spot, I was right there with you. I had Adonai Mitchell, and you touched on it. I think year 1, though, I think it will probably be a battle between him and Alec Pierce to be kind of that deep threat role, and then kind of Michael Pittman and Josh Downs at first, at least, in those 1 and 2 spots. But I think eventually Adonai Mitchell is going to emerge as that number 2 guy. I think he's a really great fit for Anthony Richardson because he's a guy who just, he has an insane like cannon for an arm, and he also just lets it rip, man. Like I think Mitchell's a guy that can get open quickly, and I think he also has juice after the catch that I think is yet to be tapped into as well. I think there's a lot of potential there for him to be a perennial 1,000, 1,300, 1,500 yard guy per season. Like I really do believe that.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part of our preview. The three most important players on this Colts team, in your opinion. I think we all can agree that one of them has to be Anthony Richardson, correct? Would you agree?
100%. Yeah.
I think he would be number one. Now, going back to our off-season acquisition conversation, they did bring in Joe Flacco for $5 million as a backup, which I think is noteworthy just because, of course, we're not trying to speak it into existence or say that he's going to get hurt, nor do we wish he's going to get hurt. But it's nice to have that insurance policy. And you saw what Joe Flacco did at least getting the Browns to the playoffs last year, showed he can still be a capable backup at the very least in today's NFL. So if he does get hurt, just like you kind of had last year with Gardner Minshew, you have Joe Flacco now. But Anthony Richards' health, most of all, is number one most important. Because if he's healthy, he showed enough last year to where we think he can be, or at least I think he could turn into a talented leader who can dominate games, kind of like, I don't want to say Lamar Jackson because that guy's won, 2 MVPs? But similar to that, he can have that kind of effect on football games with his athleticism.
I mean, how many super weapon quarterbacks can there actually be in the AFC? Like, it's actually insane. And honestly, AR, like, there is some like questions about the health of his right shoulder right now. He was held out of the last few days of spring mini camps, and I think he was held out of some of the rookie mini camp as well, due to like short soreness in his right shoulder after that major surgery. So this season may just ride on the right shoulder of Anthony Richardson. That's just the reality, man.
Yeah. So who's your number two?
My number two.
Your next guy doesn't really.
I think for my next guy, I think I'm gonna say Josh Downs, just because I think he's in a really good spot to break out to the next level this season. I really do. I really do think Shane Steichen will have a plan for him to get more touches, get more involved, get more comfortable. He had a really good rookie year last year, as I think a third-round pick, I think it was. And I think he's not going to blow you away physically with his, speed or, I guess just explosiveness or anything like that. But he just knows how to get open. And I think if he can be a legitimate number 2 wide receiver, and then if Adonai Mitchell is who we think he is, then it could be a situation where you've got Michael Pittman as your number 1 guy, and then you have a 2A and a 2B, which I think is the ideal scenario for this Colts team.
Yeah, so for my number 2, I kind of cheated a little bit. I went with kind of just their tackle situation as a whole. And that includes Bernhard Raimann, who they picked in 2022 as a third rounder, who's actually kind of developed into a really nice or a fine pass protector at left tackle.
Yeah.
He took a big step last year after, kind of a rough first year. And that was great to see for them. He's kind of turned into one of Chris Ballard's big wins of recent drafts. But also you look on the other side at right tackle is really where my focus, I guess, narrows in on this offensive line, just because There's some uncertainty with Braden Smith, who missed 7 games last year due to a knee injury that he had off-season surgery to repair. And then in his absence, they've been dealing with his absence, or they know how to deal with his absence. But Blake Freeland was the guy that took the snaps when Smith was missing games. And this year, in the 3rd round, they drafted Matt Goncalves, the Pittsburgh offensive tackle. I don't know how you say his last name. Matt Goncalves or something like that, who could potentially be an option at right tackle if Smith has more trouble this year. It's really that right tackle position for me that's going to be important for them, because you definitely want to keep Anthony Richardson upright as much as you can, and those tackles are going to be important. I do think Bernhard Raimann on the left side is going to continue to improve into a really nice, solid pass protecting left tackle, but it's the right side that I'm kind of worried about right now. And so when we're talking about importance to the success of the team, I think that right tackle position could be interesting, because they're either going to have a rookie starting there or a guy that's coming off a knee injury and that struggled at times.
Right.
We know about Quentin Nelson. We know he showed he was, still able to be a solid guard. Might not be what he used to be. Like the 2018 through 2020 version of Quentin Nelson, I don't think is walking through the door again, because he's dealt himself with a bunch of injuries, nagging foot injuries, back injuries, ankle injuries, and asking for that kind of transformative play now, I think it's probably asking a little bit too much, but he still showed he can be really, really solid and still be the anchor of this offensive line. But it's really that tackle position I'm focused on. And then I would have to agree with you on Josh Downs for number 3, for all the reasons that you stated. He still shined last year as a speedy rookie in the slot with 68 receptions, 11.3 yards per catch. I think there's reason to believe that he can improve upon that and have even a bigger role in this offense if there's improved quarterback play, which I also am kind of expecting. So that's my top 3 most important. I'm interested to hear your last guy.
Yeah, the guy I had in mind was Kwity Paye.
Okay.
Just because I think there's still something there. I still kind of believe in Kwity Paye. He kind of was drafted as a speed rusher out of Michigan. Super explosive. The measurables were all there. That's why he went in the 1st round. And he's shown flashes. That's the thing. He's shown really good flashes. He's a little bit like how Joe Tryon is down in Tampa. It's kind of in the same type of way where he's shown really good flashes, and when he shows the flashes, he looks like a star, a stud. But the down-to-down consistency has to improve, and if he's able to do that, then you have possibly a top 10 defensive line in football, especially if Latu is who we think he is. You got Latu, Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, and then Kwity Paye. I mean, I think that's really damn good if Kwity Paye can give you, say, 50 pressures, 8 sacks, something like that. Actually, 50 might be a lot. But.
Absolutely. Okay, so over-under win total predictions and our 2024 outlook for the Indianapolis Colts. The over-under, I believe, is 8.5 for this Colts team. So I'll ask you for your quick 2024 outlook synopsis and your over-under win total prediction.
I think for this team, there's going to be a lot of close games that they're in. There was last year, and they didn't even have their quarterback. I think, for them to be 9-8 in a worst case scenario type of season, I think this team is definitely going to take a step forward. I really do believe that. I think this team is going to be competing for one of those playoff spots. It's going to be right around that 9-10 win area. I think they could even get to 11 if things go really well. And I'm going to say the over. I think there's going to be a extra element that Anthony Richardson adds to his offense. I think the thing that we saw with the Eagles and Shane Steichen's offense that we didn't see in Indy was the deep ball, because Gardner Minshew isn't a deep ball thrower. And once they unleash that, that's going to open up the RPOs even more. That's going to open up the run game even more. And then this offense is really going to start cooking. I actually have Shane Steichen as a dark horse for Coach of the Year, actually. So I feel really good about this Colts team. I don't see them as a Super Bowl contender or anything. I don't even think they'll win the division, because I'm really high on the Texans as well. But I really do think they'll be probably in either that 5th or that 6th seed as a 10 or 11 win team.
The middle part of their schedule is where their season is going to be either won or lost for me. From the beginning of October to about Thanksgiving, they play at Jacksonville, at Tennessee, Miami, at Houston, at Minnesota, Buffalo, at the Jets, Detroit. That stretch of games looks to me to be the toughest stretch of games on their schedule. I think they finish in December with a fairly favorable draw at Denver, who's got a rookie quarterback, presumably. Tennessee, who still has a very young quarterback, and a new coach, at the Giants, and then Jacksonville again. I do believe in this Colts team. Now, 20 through 15 on our power rankings are what we're calling the fringe playoff contenders. And out of these 6 teams that we're going to be discussing in this tier, it's a good bet that 1 or 2 of them are going to be in the playoffs. That's just kind of how the NFL works.
Right.
Could be more than that, actually. But if you want to put your money on 1 or 2 of these teams to make the playoffs, depending on who it is, you're probably making a decent bet, just because of the turnover year over year that there usually is, especially in the wild card, at least, in the NFL playoffs. I think Colin Cowherd has said for years it's 4 new playoff teams on average every single year in the NFL for like the past decade. So I think the Colts could definitely be one of those teams. I have them, just glancing at their schedule, at 10 wins. I won't go much further than that. I think that's pretty realistic. Not really as a Super Bowl contender. I think one of the areas, just really fast, that they have to improve upon this year, because we didn't really talk much about the secondary, is not giving up explosive plays over the top, something that they really struggled with last year. There were a lot of times where they would go down, score a touchdown, because they were really good in the red zone. That's how they scored so many points. And credit to Shane Steichen for helping them in that area, by the way. But then 3 minutes later, 30-yard touchdown would be dropped on their heads, and they'd go back down again. There were a lot of those kinds of quick swings in games where they were giving up too many deep balls over the top. They gave up the 3rd most explosive pass plays last year, according to our friends at Bootleg Football. Those are pass plays of 20 or more yards. So that's got to get better. And I do think that adding Leatu Latu and having Kwity Paye and the most talented pass rushing group that I think this Colts team has had over the past half decade will help with that in some ways. But that has to get better if they want to try to win a lot of these close games. You can't be giving up those explosive plays, especially in the AFC, not to the rate that they did last year. But we do both think they will be, if not in the playoffs, they'll be right there. They'll be a 10-win team, most likely, maybe even an 11-win team.
And before we move on, I do want to address one thing too. Is a lot of you might be thinking, if y'all think they're going to win 10 games, why are they ranked 20? But the more important thing you should be focusing on is the tier that they're in. The actual order, I mean, we just kind of threw them together, to be honest. Like, this is more so a preview of the 20 teams we think are going to be competing for playoff spots. And
they're ranked 20. So they're ranked 20 mainly because we think their roster's good. We believe in their coach. We think we believe in their quarterback, but we're still not it's way too early to be 100% in that area.
Exactly.
That's the main reason they're ranked 20. In the AFC, if you don't have one of the surefire things at quarterback, it's hard to have you much higher than like the fringe playoff contenders, or maybe just right in the wild card, contention. That's why they're ranked 20. But take that ranking with a grain of salt still, because even if you're 20th in the preseason, doesn't mean anything. It's just where we have you. All right. It was our first team of the series, so I think we'll be able to get through the Bears a little bit faster here.
Right.
But the Bears are our number 19 team on our countdown. I don't believe we definitely didn't discuss them last year in our preview, but they've made a ton of moves this offseason to put themselves in this position. So last year they went 7-10. I believe they were. What did they finish in their division? Do you have that in front of you? Were they fourth or third? Can't remember.
I don't have it in front of me currently. No.
I can't remember what they were, but either way, they were 7-10. Didn't make the playoffs.
I think they were third because the Lions and the Packers made the playoffs. So
yeah, third in their division. That's really all you can. I guess that's really all I have to say about last year. That's how they finished. I think they finished the season pretty well. If I'm looking at it correctly, they won 4 of their last 6 games. They had a win at Minnesota 12-10 in kind of a low-scoring affair on November 27th, right after Thanksgiving. And then the very next week, they went into they beat Detroit, and they beat them pretty good, 28-13. Those are 2 very nice divisional wins on the latter half of their schedule last year.
And possibly saved Matt Eberflus's job as well.
Right. The Cleveland loss was tough. That's a game they probably could have won, but lost 20-17. But then they beat Arizona in Atlanta back-to-back. The Atlanta game was pretty emphatic, 37-17. And then, of course, lost to Green Bay last game of the season. That's kind of where things sit as of last year. They have a new quarterback. They've got a bunch of new pieces on offense. And they're looking to take another step this year, which is why we have them at 19.
Right. And brought in Shane Waldron to be their new offensive coordinator, got rid of Luke Getsy. Luke Getsy was more of the Matt LaFleur style of like quick passing game, spread. It's the Aaron Rodgers offense, and it didn't really fit Justin Fields too much. And it was a little bit ugly early on in the year, but they did find something late in the year. So it was interesting to see them move on. But they did go with Shane Waldron, which is a little bit more of the Shanahan, McVay, wide zone scheme that we see all across the NFL right now. And so many moves to this team, man. Like this team is just so exciting to talk about right now. In terms of 2023 recap, you touched on it. Like they did what they had to do. They went out and won 7 games. They kind of were a young team learning how to win, and they did that. They kind of learned how to, figure it out on the fly. And now they went into this offseason, were aggressive, got the guys they wanted, and now they're ready to compete.
Yeah. So let's get into the offseason for the Chicago Bears. There's a lot here, but 3 moves that we very much liked that were our favorite moves that they made. And number 1 for me is Caleb Williams. Look, I mean, he's got to be – their hope is he's the guy for the next 15 years. He's our franchise quarterback. After all the troubles that we've had at quarterback within this organization for pretty much the entirety of our history, with the exception of like maybe 2 guys that you can say were 2 or 3 guys that were good but not great. You think about Jay Cutler, way back in the day, back to Sid Luckman, back in the 1940s. Maybe a couple in between, but this organization, if I remember correctly, still has not had a 4,000-yard passer in the history of their organization, and they've been around since 1920, over 100 years now. So they're looking for that guy, and I think they have it in Caleb Williams. So he's number 1 for me. He's just so exciting as a football player.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, man. I think Caleb Williams being their guy at the number 1 pick, I mean, was a no-brainer. And I'll just leave it at that because you pretty much touched on everything that needed to be said. Number 2 guy for me. Where do I even start? I'm going to kind of cheat and say Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze, just because I think those 2 guys I kind of see as being very similar, actually. Like I think Keenan Allen can be a really good mentor for what Rome Odunze wants to do, and everything about Rome Odunze just screams just future star. He has the right mindset. If you listen to him talk in interviews, man, he's a likable guy. He's a guy you want to root for, that I am rooting for, honestly. And I think he's going to get under Keenan Allen's wing. Keenan Allen is a master route runner. Even at his age, he was able to put up the numbers he put up just because of his extremely advanced knowledge of how to play the position. And I think getting those 2 guys is such a perfect scenario for the Bears, especially at the price that they paid to get Keenan Allen. It was pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, actually. You need weapons for your quarterback, and they have weapons in abundance now. You already had DJ Moore, who actually no longer has to do almost everything himself, as Keenan Allen is a steady presence who's going to free DJ Moore up for bigger plays downfield, which is, I think, what he does best. And then At Washington, we know what Odunze was. In most other drafts, he may have been the number 1 receiver off the board. But in this particular draft, he was, the 3rd receiver off the board, just because there was Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors, who are just absolute freak shows. But he's a complete package. He led the nation in receiving yards. He's got deep speed. He's got the high point catchability, elusive run after catchability. He's a complete package, and he's going to bring character, some leadership right away. How to do things the right way. That receiver room right there, just with Allen, Moore, and Odunze, is very, very good. Like they're that's at least, what would you say, top 10, top 12 in football. I mean, that's, as long as Allen is healthy, that's very good, regardless of where you put them. And then, not that he's on my list, but they also brought in Gerald Everett, who's kind of a versatile downfield threat who can move in at the tight end spot, which I think complements Cole Kmet's inline power very well. Both can be red zone threats for you. And then in addition to that, you also added DeAndre Swift, who's kind of the versatile breakaway threat that they've lacked in the backfield for so long. So they made a lot of moves, but number 2 are definitely those receiver additions. So where do you go for your third guy?
My third guy was just a re-signing Jalen Johnson.
Yeah.
I think, with the situation the Bears were in just a year ago, or even just, you look back to like week 4 of the season, to be able to be sitting here now and having Johnson on a long-term deal, that is, I mean, it's a testament to how far they came in the latter half of the season, because he was clearly unhappy. Like, he made it very clear. But they turned this ship around, and he's going to be here for a long haul. And that's a huge win for this team, because now you don't have to go searching for, another high-level player at that premium position. You have that guy in-house, which is so important.
Yeah, when you have one of the league's best corners, which he's proved he is, you do everything in your power to keep him, because those kind of top high-end cornerbacks in a passing league are a dime a dollar. They don't come easy. And I think it was very important to re-sign him. He's a very complete player, a good run stopper with physicality, and also sticks to a lot of the top receivers in the league, and is capable of doing so. And they're not really going to need him to play out of position now, after Tyreek Stevenson kind of surged on the other side as a rookie with 4 interceptions.
Right.
So now you're looking at that secondary, and you've got 2 very competent, very good corners. You expect Tyreek Stevenson to take another step in year 2, and they have Kyler Gordon in slot coverage. Only some sporadic injuries have slowed down his past improvement. So I look at the secondary, and I really kind of dig it as of right now. You also bring in Kevin Byard, who I know is on the wrong side of 30, but he's a veteran, and he'll help kind of pull together this younger secondary.
Yeah, he's fantastic for that locker room.
Yeah, absolutely. So good on the Bears for getting that figured out. Let's move on to I don't really have anything prepped for this, but our most important players. We can just kind of go back and forth on this one. Do you want to start us off?
No, you can go ahead and start for this one.
Most important players on this football team. Let's see here. Um, well, I mean, I think when you look at this roster, I look at a guy like um, Darnell Wright, who proved last year that he should start as a right tackle, but neutralizing those speed rushers off the edge kind of still remains a challenge for him. So I think he'll be an important part on that offensive line. It's kind of like a young, developing player. Caleb Williams, the quarterback's always very important. On defense, Montez Sweat, I think, is going to be an important piece on this defense just because, I believe they signed him to a pretty hefty contract extension. Amped up pass rush, 20 sacks in 9 games that the Bears had after his arrival. They're going to continue to need that kind of production from their defensive line. Those are a couple names that come to mind for me, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think this is a very balanced roster.
Yeah.
So that's what makes this one a little bit interesting. But I think for me, I'm gonna say the 2 new coordinators is a really big swing factor in my opinion. I think bringing in Shane Waldron and Eric Washington as the defensive coordinator. Wait, was it Washington or Hightower? I can't remember who exactly they brought in as their defensive coordinator, but he's from San Francisco. I know that for a fact. I think making sure that the upward trajectory continues with this new coaching staff in place. And then also, the other question I have is now that there's expectations on this coaching staff and on Matt Eberflus, what will his in-game management be like, given that there's going to be more close games that he's going to have to manage. There's going to be, he's going to have to kind of shuffle through having a rookie quarterback and having expectations to win here at a decent level. So being a defensive head coach, there's always those types of questions because usually those types of guys struggle a little bit more in the time management department and things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely. And you think about Eric Washington, who is the new defensive coordinator. Been in the league for 17 years, so he's experienced. Comes from that San Francisco system. Eberflus is a defensive guy. They were using a lot of, zone heavy coverages last year to force turnovers. From week 9 on, they were third in passer rating against at 75.7 and third in takeaways, 19 takeaways for this defense from week 9 on last year. And then on the other side, I mean, you think about what Shane Waldron did in Seattle. He's a Sean McVay disciple, comes from that coaching tree, and he's the new OC. He's going to bring a lot of motion, multiple personnel groupings, better balance to this offense, and he should be able to help, Kerry Joseph, who's their quarterback's coach, with Caleb Williams' development. So I Those are absolutely two X factors for this team. Anytime you have two new coordinators, something to watch. So the over-under win total for Chicago right now is set at 8.5, just like the Indianapolis Colts. So looking at their schedule for this year, where do you sit on the Bears for 2024?
Well, I think I'll say this over under projection I think is like right where I would have them, like right in that 9-win range. I think the NFC is going to be a little bit less deep than the AFC, so I think a team like the Bears sneaking into the playoffs is a little bit more realistic than it is in the AFC, or than it would be in the AFC, obviously. Um, Look, I think there's still a lot of question marks here. I think, there's some questions to have with the offensive line, the starting center job, um, Braxton Jones kind of going through this injury in camp, which is a bit of a question mark. Um, it does feel like I am nitpicking, though. I really do like this roster a lot, but I can't go over on every team, man. I'm just gonna say under for the sake of not looking like you know, just not being for the sake of not going over on every team, even though I do like this team a lot.
From mid-November on, November 17th through the end of the season. That's let's see, 8 games basically. They have their bye right after week 6. So they get kind of an earlier season bye. But from November 17th, right before the week before Thanksgiving on, and I bring this up because my team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, is the only other team in the NFL with this exact same situation with their schedule. In those span of 8 games, they play all 6 of their divisional games.
Wow.
It goes Green Bay at home, Minnesota at home, at Detroit on a short week, Thursday Night Football for Thanksgiving. Let's see, at San Francisco, at Minnesota, Detroit again, Seattle on a short week, at Green Bay.
Wow.
We know how taxing those divisional matchups can be. That's a lot in an 8-week span. That's potentially, if you want to make the playoffs, you're going to have to, or you want to hit 9-10 wins potentially, which I think is probably the ceiling for this Bears team this year.
Yeah.
That's going to be, I think, the key stretch. Not that, the beginning part of their schedule is easy, because I don't think it is. It's a opening with Tennessee at home, a game that probably could go either way in week 1. I mean, you never know with those week 1 games. And then at Houston, at Indianapolis, and the Rams, who we think are going to be very good this year. Those 3 teams, like we just said how high we are on the Colts, Houston's going to be presumably very good again. And then Indianapolis, along with the Rams. There's really not a whole lot of, in my opinion, soft spots on this schedule. I mean, right after the bye, you get at Washington, at Arizona, and New England. And then you start that stretch of 8 games with 6 divisional opponents, along with Seattle, and, a couple others, San Francisco. So their schedule is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, in my opinion. And although they're going to be one of the more exciting teams to watch, I think, in the league, although they have a lot of new pieces, and I like the direction they're going, I would have to say under 8.5, but I do think it'll be 8 and 9 as opposed to 7 and 10. So I'd agree with you there. And I probably think they're right around the same spot in their division. Minnesota's an interesting situation. I probably think they finish ahead of them though. We'll have to see on that, but I do still think it's Green Bay in Detroit and then Chicago in that division, and that's how I think it'll play out. So
and the interesting thing with the Bears is, even though Matt Eberflus did answer some questions, you could still argue that he's the fourth best coach in that division. And definitely the coach with the warmest seat as well. In my opinion, Dan Campbell's staying for the long haul. Matt LaFleur is staying. He just got the most out of Jordan Love this past year, and then of course Kevin O'Connell, who is just now starting with his new rookie quarterback, and I think we'll get a long leash there as well. So there is some question still there as to whether the Bears will, if they disappoint, look for that offensive-minded head coach.
Yeah. Anything else we need to add on tonight's episode? Our first in a series of 10 NFL preview episodes for 2024.
Do you want to do something fun and maybe predict quarterback stats for Caleb Williams and Anthony Richardson real quick? Just
sure.
Throw some numbers out there. All right. Caleb Williams. All right. I'm going to say 25 touchdowns and 9 picks and about. All right. I'm going to say 4,000 yards. I'm going to say he gets to 4,000 yards.
Okay. I'll go 24 touchdowns.
Okay.
11 picks. I'll go with around he is a rookie. Let's say I think 64, 65% completion percentage would be a good rookie year.
Yeah, for sure. Not everyone's CJ Stroud.
Exactly.
75%, right?
I'll get 64% completion percentage. And I would agree around 4,000 yards. I just think with this many weapons, and I do think they're going to score some points. They're going to let him throw the ball a lot. He'll get to about 4,000 yards. I'll go 24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, a 64% completion percentage, and around 4,000 yards. It's just a for fun quarterback prediction there. What about Anthony Richardson?
I'm gonna say same thing. I'm gonna say 25 touchdowns, but 9 rushing touchdowns, so 34 total. And then I'll go 13 picks because he'll be gunslinging a little bit. And I'm going to say he gets to about 3,800 yards passing.
Okay. I like that. I think he'll get how many rushing – do you remember how many rushing touchdowns he had in the first 4 games last year when he was actually healthy?
I think he had 2 or 3. And I think one of them was the play where he got hurt. In that concussion where he kind of flipped over.
Assuming he's healthy for majority of the season, let's say he plays at least 14, 15 games.
Yeah.
I think he'll get to 10 rushing touchdowns. I'll just throw that out there.
Okay.
I think it'll be about 22, 23 passing touchdowns. Let's say 23. About 3,800 yards. Around the same as you, just a little bit different way of getting there. Yeah, I like that exercise.
Yeah. What if we just continue that throughout this series, and what if we just whoever was closer on the stat gets like a point or something? I don't know.
What about real fast before I like that? Real fast before we get out of here. A couple rookie predictions.
Okay.
First of all, sacks for Leatu Latu in his rookie year.
Ooh, okay.
And then receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns for Adonai Mitchell in his rookie year.
Okay. Leatu Latu, I'm going to say he gets to 10.5 sacks.
Okay.
Adonai Mitchell, I'm going to say 48 receptions, 921 yards. Random, but okay. And then 4 touchdowns.
Okay. I don't know if they have odds on these kinds of things, but Latu, I think will get. I want to go the same as you. I'll say 11 sacks
Okay.
on the dot. For Mitchell, I'm going to do some math here. I'm going to say 45 receptions at about probably like 12, 13 yards per catch.
Okay. Yeah.
Say 12 and a half yards per catch. Well, that's kind of low. I'll go.
Yeah. He averaged like 16 in college, so that's what makes it kind of interesting.
Yeah. I'll go 47 receptions for about 750 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Okay. Yeah, I went really high on the 921 yards now that I think about it. But
Yeah.
fuck it, I'm gonna
Could
leave
happen.
it. Yeah.
Could happen. He is
A couple 70-yard touchdowns thrown in there. That would be cool.
possibly. All right. Any other stat predictions that you want to do before? Oh, let's do the same thing with Romo Dunze really fast.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Roma Dunze. I'm gonna say I guess if he's the third option, okay, I'm gonna say okay. I think they're gonna throw quite a bit, so I'm gonna say 58 receptions. No, 64 receptions for. All right, same thing. 921 yards. Fuck it.
Okay.
And
I do think like
okay,
even
and
though we think of him
6
as
touchdowns.
the number 3 option, I do
Yeah,
think Williams is going to target him more than you think.
yeah, definitely. You're probably right.
Dunze.
I'm just thinking like there's so many mouths to feed, right?
I'll
Like
go
I think they'll use Swift in the passing game a bit. They still got Komet.
I'll go 42 catches. I feel like that's kind of a
I think that's a good number. Yeah.
42 catches.
How many targets do you think? Like 68 or something? 70?
Yeah, somewhere like that. And then I'd say like 42 catches were probably 550, 60, 550, 600 yards. I do think he's going to score some touchdowns. Maybe like 6 or 7 touchdowns, something like that.
Yeah.
That's a hard exercise, but it's also
I think it's pretty fun. We just came up with that on the fly, guys. So
yeah.
if y'all enjoyed that part,
We'll continue to do that kind of randomly at the end of these things. But until next time, I don't know exactly when 18 and 17 are going to be, but we're going to give this episode a couple days to breathe, and then we'll circle back around with another episode. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, a lot more football content coming. We've got some Olympics content coming. We've also have MLB content coming for the All-Star break, along with is the Open Championship next week? I think.
Oh, it is.
It's either this upcoming week or the week after. I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's the week after, maybe. I think it's the week of my birthday, the 19th.
Yeah, so we'll have that as well. So busy times here on the Raw Prospect Podcast YouTube channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. For Emmy Nixon, for myself, Michael Ween, we will be back either tomorrow or Sunday for another episode. But until then, enjoy your night and peace out.
Peace. Football.